Hello friends, I am Chevee. Welcome to my shed. How are you today? How's life in your world? How's things where you are? I hope it's fantastic and wonderful. Everything here is really good. I've been putting coats of finish on the shelves I'm making, and these are getting picked up on Sunday, so I have to get... I'll probably put 3 or 4 coats of gloss on, and then 1 or 2 coats of satin. I'm not sure. 4 or 5 coats. Is more than enough, especially on something that's not getting a ton of abuse. I don't like to do more than about 3 coats in a day. These take a while. This is an oil-based finish. I've discovered there is a water-based version of their wipe-on poly. I've never used it. I've never even seen it for sale, but I think I saw it on Amazon and was really kind of shocked. Regardless, I prefer an oil-based wiping varnish because you're putting it on really thin and it allows the oil to get into the fibers and cure. The biggest issue with putting on straight oil-based finish that I've experienced is if you put it on with a brush or a sponge, so much of it soaks into the wood, the top layer cures, but then it stays gummy underneath. And if you go back and sand, it gets gummy again, and it can be kind of annoying. But I like that oil-based finishes penetrate and harden the top layer of fibers. Water-based finishes are just kind of a sit-on-top finish. They don't really penetrate much, if at all. Whereas the oil that's in here is what's really doing the penetrating. Now the polyurethane that's in here, the plastic, will sit on top and will give top layer structure, but the oil gets into the pores. And so putting it on thin, letting it sit for a couple hours. I have a fan on in here. It's probably a little cooler in here than it should be. I think the can calls for 70 degrees. It's probably in the 60s in here. But the fan that I have is blowing, the heater, I have one of those little tiny heaters, is blowing straight across this, which is good. Air movement's good. I think I've said it before that the oil-based finishes are curing finishes. They don't dry, they cure. And the oil that's in here, probably linseed oil, polymerizes or oxidizes, and so it needs oxygen to cure. So air movement is good. More oxygen flowing over the piece is good. And the nice thing about wipe-on is you're putting it on so thin that you don't have to worry about dust, even with the fan blowing. I've talked about it before with people who use things like teak oil finish or linseed oil finishes or probably tung oil, which is everybody's favorite, if you should leave a fan blowing, and people say no because the dust will settle. But when you're doing it with a wipe-on mix, which is basically like half of this is thinner, right? So there's only about half oil, half thinner. It goes on so thin that there's nothing for the dust to really stick to. And between coats, I abrade it very lightly. The can says 220 sandpaper. I've never done that. I think that somebody's been commenting on a video recently about the way that I use Polycrylic, which is the water-based version. I don't do what the can says on Polycrylic. I don't do what the can says on this. I don't know what the can says on most of the finishes that I use, just simply because I've never found the need. This says to scuff between coats to 220. I've never found a need for that. I have no reason to ever do that. I scuff with steel wool, or synthetic steel wool is what I usually use, and it's just fine. I've never had a problem with it. And I much prefer the finish that I get after a few coats without sanding, with just this guy. So it'll even tell you, like, let's see, what does it say? 2 to 3 hours dry, lightly sand surface with fine sandpaper to ensure an even finish and proper adhesion. Remove all dust, apply a second coat if a third is desired, blah, blah, blah. After final coat, allow 24 hours before light use. So, this is saying like 3 coats, which is what I was saying earlier. 3 coats in a day is about the most I like to use. If there is an adhesion issue, if there is a curing issue, if you keep going coat after coat after coat after coat, and the undercoat has never got a chance to finish curing. It never will, and you'll have this gummy surface that if you nick, you'll get this weird peeling, gummy, funny surface. So I don't do more than like 3-ish coats a day. I mean, I have gone to 4, probably done 5, but I'm not going to go, every 2 hours come down here and slap a new coat on. I don't do that. But I don't sand, and I find that it works just great. I don't need to sand. If this is going to be a heavily used surface, if this is going to be like a table or something like that, I will put on probably 6 coats of wipe-on poly. Again, gloss first, followed by satin. Satin for my top coats. I will do like 6 coats of this, and then I will sand before putting on the satin. And I'll put 2 coats of satin steel wool in between each coat. That is to make sure that the flattening agents in here don't settle in a uniform way. Flattening agents are basically just almost like dust in the mix, and they will settle. And if you don't sand between coats and you put on the flattening agent, it will it'll naturally settle into the grain of the wood, and it will look fakey. You'll have these highs and lows where the flattening agent settles into the grain but not on top, and so the top will be shiny. It looks really weird. If you scratch it first with sandpaper, the flattening agent will settle into those scratches and it'll look more uniform and even. So between these two, yes, I will actually use sandpaper. Now, if I'm doing straight, but here's the other thing, if I'm doing straight satin, which I don't normally do, but if this is all I have and I'm going to put on 3 or 4 coats of this, then no, I don't do the sanding, because the first coat is going to kind of set the bar for the rest, and it'll as long as you're doing like 3-ish coats, it'll even itself out. You might have, after the first coat, you'll have some flat spots and some high spots or some glossy spots. After the second or third coat, that'll all disappear. No need to sand. Wow, I was not expecting to have a class on how I use wipe-on poly today. But I really enjoy it. It's one of those finishes that I feel like it gives the protection that is needed for a moderately used piece. This is going to be a shelf that's on the back of a couch. It's not going to get, hot cups set on it, or there's not going to be a whole lot of abrasion going on. Nobody's going to be sliding stuff across it. So I don't feel like I need to do a really heavy top coat or a really hard undercoat. But I feel like for a moderate use piece, wipe-on poly is perfect. It really, really does do a wonderful job of penetrating, hardening the top layer of fibers, and providing that plastic film finish that helps protect it. So there you go. Today's lesson on how Chevee does wipe-on poly. Let me know how you use it, or do you use it? Have you ever used it? Do you make your own? I know a lot of people make their own. There's, you buy a gallon of polyurethane or a quart of polyurethane, buy a gallon of thinner, and you can make, so much more than what this costs. But for me, it's just a pain in the ass. I don't use it I'm not down here putting on a gallon of wipe-on poly every year, so I need to just, nickel and dime. I would much rather have the convenience of a shaky can that I just go to the store and pick up when I need it. This will last me for quite a while before I need to go restock. But if you're really in a pinch and you want to try it, yeah, buy a can of oil-based polyurethane, buy a can of mineral spirits, mix it half and half. It's the same thing. Okay. Thank you for being here as always. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, being amazing friends, wonderful people. I really appreciate you. And I see you again on Monday. Today's word you should know to sound smart is coffee clatch. It is a noun meaning an informal social gathering, typically including coffee and gossip. Jeanette is not welcome at our coffee clatch because she refuses to gossip about her social contacts. Coffee clatch. KAFFEEKLATSCH. freaking weird word. I mean, that has to be German, right? But it's pronounced coffee klatsch. Yeah, I mean, yeah.